How do you celebrate yourself? Let's start with defining what celebration is. According to Merriam-Webster, celebrate means to perform a sacrament or solemn ceremony publicly and with appropriate rites, to honor an occasion such as a holiday, especially by solemn ceremonies or refraining from ordinary business, to mark something such as an anniversary by festivities or other deviation from routine, or to hold up or play up for public notice. Quite frankly, this definition of celebration seems very vague and narrow, and it almost sounds like it has to be like a big deal in order to be celebrated. I personally find it very difficult to celebrate myself and my own achievements, and today I want to explore this along with celebrating the 50th episode of Hello Trauma Brain. Hi, I am Raysa, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and you are listening to Hello Trauma Brain, a podcast where I share my experiences living with complex PTSD. My hope is this podcast can help destigmatize mental health and provide support for anyone diagnosed with CPTSD who thinks they might have it or has a loved one with this diagnosis. Quick reminder, I am not a licensed psychologist or mental health care professional, and this podcast is not meant to replace nor substitute the care of psychologists, other mental or medical health care professionals. If you think you might have complex PTSD or PTSD, please reach out to your primary care or mental health care provider. Any individuals or resources mentioned in this episode are not sponsoring Hello Trauma Brain. This episode may reference trauma or abuse, and listener discretion is advised. Remember, you can always pause or skip this episode at any time. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello, dear survivors, and welcome to this episode of Hello Trauma Brain. Thank you for joining me today. So, quick check-in. I'm going to start with the full disclosure, which is I am recording this again. I had recorded the episode yesterday, and something got messed up with the file, and the whole check-in, like a good chunk of it, is just gone. GarageBand says it can't find the file. It's showing us this blank audio thing. I tried a backdoor way through the package contents and a media folder. I just literally learned how to do this yesterday doing a Google search, and it did not yield any results because the file is truly gone. So I'm recording this again, and I decided to switch gears. The check-in I did, I'm gonna now do an episode on what happened. So instead, let me say, hey, I missed you peeps. I took a week off. I literally got sick just a few days before Thanksgiving. Believe it or not, that's exactly what happened. And even though by the end of Thanksgiving Day, I was feeling a lot better, I technically was sick for a chunk of it, and I decided to rest and take it easy. And even though I could have pushed and done the episode for last week, I was like, let's just take a breather and actually stay still, or as still as I could be, because quite frankly, it was a hard weekend for me. That weekend marked the second anniversary from when I officially sent the no contact letter to my main abusers. And that weekend is rough now. So I will say it gets easier a little bit. It's not as hard as the first time around this thing and last year, but it's not easy. So I will talk about that in another episode, but I am recovered. I will say though that right now, as I'm recording this, I'm feeling even better than I did yesterday. And I finished the audiobook for Lindsay C. Gibson's book titled Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And basically, I need to buy this thing so I can actually mark it up and highlight it and do all those things. But the audiobook, I mean, the person who narrated it did a very good job. And I still got the info that way. And whew. I already reheard one of the chapters towards the end of the book. It's an excellent read. If you are recovering, especially from the parental situation, this is a great book for you. And quite frankly, towards the end, it offers some really good information, even if parental is not the thing that did you into the trauma world. And this book was highly recommended by the latest guest I've had on the podcast, Casey Smith. And quite frankly, any forum I've ever been a part of that has to do with recovering from trauma, childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse, this book always came up. So I can now say that I've officially read it. It feels weird to say read it because I technically listened to the audiobook. I didn't physically read word by word. But anyhow, it's behind me. I've done it. I feel like I need to reread this thing and it might take a few reads to really take in all the information. There are some parts that are harder to digest, I will say. But again, overall, a read that I definitely do not regret at all. If anything, I wish I would have read it sooner because the information there was extremely valuable and I could have used that a while back and throughout all this time that I haven't had it. But now I have it and I'm going to focus on that part for now. So for those of you that had Thanksgiving weekend, I hope it was as gentle as it can be. I know this type of time of the year can be very hard for people like us. But regardless of how it was, you're not alone. You're so welcome here and I'm so glad you are listening today. But this week, I want to celebrate and talk about the achievements of Hello Trauma Brain for this 50th episode celebration. Yo, 50 episodes. Like, what? I knew that if I kept doing it for long enough, eventually, you get to 50, right? But to get to 50. So some platforms count my trailers as episodes, so to them I went over 50 already, but let's be real, those are not full-length episodes. So this is 50 episodes. I guess I want to start off by so I had the urge to start off by saying thank you to all of you for listening, which I do mean, but I am noticing that is coming from a place of get the spotlight off of you and your achievements and turn it into people making this possible. They did this. It's because of them, not because of me. So let's shelve that for a moment. I noticed it. It's there. And instead, I'm going to shift and start. So I want to start the celebration by acknowledging the work that I've done. Because I have shown up and I have done this ditty with CPTSD, with OCD, with all the things on hard days, on easier days. I have recorded episodes sick. I try not to, but I know I did an episode a while back, season 1, where I was still sick and I recorded it anyway. I can tell you that I have finished editing episodes when I've been sick. So for example, this past episode that I put out, part 2 of my interview with Casey Smith, I technically was already sick as I was finishing the editing of the episode and the setting it up for publication and the promotion. Yeah, taking breaks when I am sick, it's still a work in progress, to put it lightly. But yeah, I want to hold space for what I've done and the work that I've put into this podcast because it's been a huge learning curve for me. And yeah, so now I want to shift gears to talk about why celebrating is so hard for me and how celebrations were wrecked for me. It wouldn't be a Hello Trauma Brain episode if I don't address the trauma behind it, so let's get that out of the way. So back when I was still in full-blown contact with my abusers, celebrations were associated with times where I would be putting a lot of pressure on myself to be in the right mood for it, be in the perfect mindset. And I used to put a lot of high stakes on special days, or on days where I was being celebrated, or days where somebody else was supposed to be celebrated. So basically for me, celebrations equaled the day needs to be perfect, which is a lot of pressure, especially for a young kid, or even as an adult, to be honest. Also, celebrations tended to be days where some of the abuse would ramp up. And I think part of that is because the narcissistic people in my life would also put those high stakes with celebrations, and they would get very dysregulated and very abusive when in their mind the day would be ruined. I think for them it took a lot of energy and bandwidth to put on the fake mask and smile and be on their best behavior, and it's too much. So the moment they were in the car, the moment we got home, something tended to blow up. And even if it wasn't every time, it was enough that you almost dreaded the ride home or getting home because the shoe could drop at any time. And a lot of times it did. And when it didn't, I had still spent so much time, energy, and bandwidth doing my OCD thing to try to avoid the shoe from dropping that I was depleted anyway and feeling horrible. To be honest, as I was reflecting on this episode and I was trying to figure out, are celebrations hard for me? Why are celebrations hard for me? For a while, I was like, am I pushing this? Am I trying to seek for trauma in everything when there isn't any? Maybe celebrations were fine for me. And then I started to really think about, okay, what happened for graduations? What happened on my birthday? What happened for this? What happened for that? And then I started to really realize, oh, yeah. They were wrecked massively. In the spirit of giving examples to create awareness, and this is something that during my conversation with Casey Smith, who's the host of It's Not Normal, which is a mental health podcast, during our conversation, we were talking about how important it is to actually talk about what happened, because if nobody talks about it, then nobody realizes it's not normal and those things are actually abusive. And that really stayed with me. And even though I've done that before, I am going to try to be more intentional about actually saying how things were wrecked for me and what examples of abusive behavior can be. Because otherwise, just saying it got wrecked and it was abusive, like, what does that mean, right? And I think part of why I sometimes stay away from saying too many examples also comes from the fact that I don't want to trigger people and I don't want to make this too heavy. But then again, it's a bit of a disservice if I don't actually define things, because then people can't realize that things that are happening to them shouldn't be happening to them. Does that make sense? All right, reeling myself back in. A few examples of how celebrations were wrecked for me as I grew up and as I have navigated my life into the 36 years that I've been alive on this planet. I remember occasions where celebrations were happening as times where I would lose my autonomy a little bit more than usual. And let me give you an example of this. For my, sixth grade? Yeah, for my 6th grade and 9th grade graduation, and maybe even for younger graduations, but I honestly don't remember. I do remember 6th grade and 9th grade. For those particular years, I remember during that time, I was letting my hair grow long. I love to have long hair. I just did. I had a particular abuser who would offer to cut the ends of my hair as the graduation day was approaching. And this looked like this. They would sit me down and they would say, okay, your hair is looking too unhealthy. We need to cut the ends. And I remember saying, okay, but please don't cut it too short. And now even thinking about that, the fact that I was saying that in 6th grade means it had happened before, because otherwise, why would I be begging for this time to be different? And you see where I'm going with this? It goes deep. So I would say, please, and beg. I would try to refuse the haircut because I didn't want the hair to be cut too short, but a whole fight would break out and they would be like, no, your hair is too unhealthy. We need to at least cut the ends. I promise. It's just going to be the ends. Come on. I sit down. And this would be a situation where I was not in a professional salon, so I can't see the reflection in the mirror, I don't see how much hair is getting pulled, but I can see how much hair is falling on the floor. And there would be a lot of fussing around with me being like, wait, are you sure you're just doing the ends? That looks like a lot. And a lot of gaslighting, like, sit still, shut up, it's not too much, I'm just doing the ends, just let me work, I know how to do this, I'm a professional at doing this. So 6th grade and 9th grade, both of these haircuts were from my hair being almost down to my waist to up to my ears. And I have curly hair. I grew up in Puerto Rico. The humidity in Puerto Rico is astronomical. You think that August in the east coast of the United States is humid? That's like child's play in Puerto Rico. That's like mild humidity over there. When you're in Puerto Rico in the middle of summer, at the peak of its humidity, it almost like takes your breath away. It's like a slap in the face. So my hair would be up to my ears, and then this person would try to straighten it. And with the humidity, it would just look like this puffy mess. And for graduations, you wear the cap and gown. It was devastating. It was devastating that I had spent so much time getting my hair to be long for graduation day just to see it be cut up to my ears right before graduation. And I hated the pictures. I didn't like how it looked. And the thing is, with my curly hair, the hair was like really short. So they would straighten it so at least it would reach my ears straight. But with the humidity, it would be like barely peeking out of the cap and all frizzed up. It did not look good. The pictures did not look good. I didn't feel good about myself. I would feel so embarrassed about how I looked. And those years in particular, I was like a 4.0 GPA kid. Like 9th grade, I got the President Award for my GPA being perfect the entire time I have been in school so far. They were big celebrations. I was one of the top students in my class. And because I sang, usually they would also have me sing a song for the graduation. And it was a lot of spotlight on me and quite embarrassing that I looked like that. Yeah, celebrations got wrecked in that way. They were celebrations when I was very young that I know some people in my life missed because of their work. I had a particular person in my life that was, still is, extremely workaholic. And the job they had at the time didn't allow them to take off. I'm not even sure if they even asked off or if they were too embarrassed to ask off. Yeah, for that one, I remember specifically the one time I won the science fair and that person wasn't there. But then the other abuser, who was the person who took us there, the entire time was complaining that this other person couldn't come and they should have come. And just to give you some context, we're talking, I must have been maybe 5 or 6 years old when that particular thing happened. So for a very young kiddo who's winning a science fair, to hear hours and hours of somebody complaining about a different adult that wasn't there, who I wanted to have there. You know, I was already upset and heartbroken that they were not there. That still impacts me to this day. And then on top of that, to have an adult put on all their frustrations on me, hard, very hard. I will say, high school graduation, I rebelled. And I didn't let this person cut my hair. And I did have luscious, beautiful, long hair for my senior high school graduation. And that felt glorious. That was really nice. They did get away with cutting my hair a few times while I was in high school. That was a bit brutal. And I did get bullied in school for that. Thank you very much. If you ever listen to this, you know who you are. College graduation. Let me tell you how that went. The night before graduation, I was not allowed to stay in my college dorm because we all needed to sleep together. Because it had been so long since I had visited and we had not spent time together. And there was this whole thing with me being forced to sleep in the same bed with other people. So the night before my graduation, I barely slept. Why? Because sleep deprivation is something abusers use. And this is how it looked like for me on that particular day. And sleep deprivation from abusers deserves a whole episode. But on that particular night before graduation, the sleep deprivation abuse tactic looked like this. My one abuser cried for hours about how upset they were that I lived on this really tiny college dorm and they did not like how messy it looked and it wasn't decorated in the way they would have wanted. And part of the issue was the college dorm was tiny. I had too much stuff. This particular abuser likes to send things, or when I would visit them, they would pack my bag with so many fucking gifts and so many things. And basically there was no space for all that shit. So it was packed on storage boxes or containers and it wouldn't all fit on the closet. So they were, organized as best as I could around the tiny college dorm, because all college dorms are tiny unless you had enough money to have like a full suite over there. And they cried for hours and hours that their baby was living under such horrible conditions and I should have stayed at home with them and I should have stayed in college in Puerto Rico so I could be close to them. And had I done that, my room would have been cleaned by them. Oh my gosh. And that would be intermixed with the other abuser yelling at them because they wouldn't shut up. They kept crying loudly and nobody could sleep. So I was tired on graduation day. Another thing they went on and on about was how they did not like the dress that I picked for graduation. And basically because of the distance, when I went shopping for my dress and for my shoes, different people took me and went with me and helped me pick the dress and helped me pick the shoes, but it wasn't this particular person. So guess what happened? They hated the dress. They hated the shoes. They kept insisting that the person that went with me to pick the shoes actually was jealous of me, and they helped me pick those shoes because they actually wanted me to look awful and ugly on graduation day. And had they been with me to buy the shoes, they would have made sure that I had the most beautiful shoes. And now I was gonna look like that, and it didn't look good. And the thing with the dress is hiding underneath the cap and gown, so I didn't feel much shame about the dress, even though I thought the dress was beautiful. The shoes I was not crazy about, but part of the issue with the shoes was that I am size 5. It's really hard to find size 5 shoes anywhere. And even though some stores have expanded their collections, back when I graduated from college, it was just really hard to find them. Like even harder than it is today back then. And the shoes you cannot hide under a cap and gown. The shoes are the one thing that you can see under your cap and gown. It's almost like the accessory. Well, didn't matter how I was cum laude in college. Didn't matter how many ribbons and things I had around my neck from all the honor societies I was in and all the things that I had achieved. Because I felt so bad and I felt so ashamed and I did not feel good enough. Even graduating cum laude, I was so upset because I was so close to magna cum laude. It was one class. I had like a B- in that class, and that took me down from magna to cum laude. And even though I had some friends who were like, girl, I would give anything to be cum laude. I'm not even any laude. For me, it was like, fuck, I was so close. I didn't do it right. And it's hard because on days like that, you have to put in the smile in front of other people. And quite frankly, I was so disassociated during that graduation because I was stuck in this OCD cycle about the shoes, about everything, sleep deprived, getting berated like that. Forget it. Whew. This doesn't feel like a celebration. Oh my god. Oh. That hurt. That really hurt. I wasn't expecting to get hit like that, but that is what this podcast is for, to process things. And this is just a few examples. The reason celebrations are so hard for me is because from the outside, it looked like I was celebrated. It really did. If you did not see the night before at the hotel, if you did not see the ride to the graduation, if you did not see the behind the scenes, it looked perfect. It looked like I was so happy to have these people there, and they were dressed to the fucking nines, and they were smiling and taking pictures, and they looked proud. But nobody saw what happened behind closed doors. So they thought that I was being celebrated, and it looked like I was being celebrated, but it didn't feel like I was. And I think that's why I struggle with celebrating myself. So, why this episode? Oh my gosh. I thought about a lot of things. I honestly wasn't sure how to go about this episode, and quite frankly, I thought this bit of talking about how celebrations was going to be really short, and it's looking pretty long on my end. I know I'm going to edit it down, but still, even with all the editing, I think it's going to be longer than what I expected it to be. So this episode is going to be part of what the Narcissist Rec series, and the reason is because despite all the pain, the celebration brings up in me, all the pain that I did not expect to see come out, even now, so I've been recording this episode. I want to reclaim celebrating myself. So some of these people that have been wrecking celebrations for me for years, when something good happens, they might express a lot of pride and happiness, but it's short. It's like maybe like 2 minutes of screaming and being like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, I'm so proud of you, wow. And then like clockwork, but it's not good enough. And they wouldn't use the words that's not good enough, but all the other things, and it would be like, but the outfit you picked did not look good, but so and so was the top of the class, you were just number 4, you were not number 1. Like, it was subtle ways to say you're not good enough time and time again. So quite frankly, even though I strive to achieve and I strive to get there, I never get to the point where it feels satisfying. It's so hard to get there. In recent years, as I have healed, I have got no contact with main abusers, I have been engaging with other people that are healthier and non-abusive and definitely act in different ways. I have started to notice something different happening when I share something I achieved with them. And something I have noticed from a few of them is that they're happy for me, they get so excited for my achievement, and they tend to ask, how are you going to celebrate yourself? What are you going to do this weekend to celebrate yourself? And every time they've asked that question, it strikes me because I'm like, what am I doing? Nothing. I had nothing planned. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I'm glad it felt really good to achieve that, but I didn't think that I merited any celebration. And quite frankly, even though they asked the question, they're like, you totally should celebrate yourself. And they encourage me. I'll think to myself, oh yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I'll go out to dinner to a nice place. I am yet to go to dinner to a nice place. Sometimes I have gone and take out. That's the closest I've gone to celebrating myself. I'll be like, well, maybe I'll get sushi tonight. And I'll pick up sushi, but I won't have it there. I'll still have it here. And it almost feels like a regular, ordinary thing. It's really hard to celebrate myself. Even now, this whole episode, it was supposed to be like 5 minutes of how I was wrecked. And then the rest of the episode was supposed to be, we're celebrating. And it's flipped. I feel like the celebration part is going to be short. And the whole episode was about how I got wrecked. I don't know how to celebrate. I'm just going to say it. I tried. I'm trying. I don't know how to celebrate myself. I would like to go to this coffee shop I discovered recently that I love before they close today to celebrate myself and go out. And this episode is taking so long to record. I'm starting to think I might need to shift gears here, but I want to finish the episode. And I think I can still make the coffee shop work. And if it doesn't happen today, I will make it work some other day. Like, I'm going to try to practice not putting my celebration on a deadline and not having an expiration date to celebrate myself. Let's celebrate myself as best as I can. Oh my gosh, let me be real. So when I come in front of the microphone, I have a bit of an idea of what I want to say and what I want to do. And then I come up here and the thing is in front of me. And sometimes I surprise myself with what comes out. And it's happening right now. Okay, so let's celebrate the 50th episode of this marvelous podcast. I am proud of this podcast. I never thought in a million years I could podcast. I know I'm a singer. I've known I'm good at singing for many years. I didn't think I could do a podcast. I started this as a do-it-yourself project, and it still is a solo endeavor. I didn't know if I was going to make it to 50. I'm feeling the OCD kicking in. I'm feeling a lot of discomfort with celebrating myself. It's really, really hard to talk about myself in a positive way and to recognize my achievements. Part of it is I don't want to sound arrogant. I don't want to let this go over my head. I'm gonna keep reeling myself back in. We're celebrating. We're gonna take a moment to celebrate this podcast, even if it's 2 minutes. I'm gonna do it. All right, so let's talk about some achievements of the podcast. The top episode on Spotify so far is episode 2. What is CPTSD? And then the other platform where I can see the top episode is on YouTube. And the top episode over there is episode 4. Gaslight, a movie illustration. I can see top episodes in other platforms, so we'll go with those two. Let's go through the stats, the analytics for the pod. So on YouTube so far, the podcast has had 2,403 views. That is with the 49 episodes out. I have 64 subscribers. On Apple Podcasts, I have a little bit over 2.3 thousand views. I have 72 followers over there. And I do get to see the top countries on Apple Podcast, which are the United States, followed by United Kingdom, then Canada, Australia, and then Sweden. Those are my top 5. So on Spotify, I have 150 followers. I just got a new one today. I have a little bit over 1,200 streams in the lifetime of the podcast. And I do have some charting highlights. And this is according to Chartable, and just want to take a moment to hold space for the fact that Chartable is actually ending. They're being sunsetted, and pretty much at this point, they're not even showing a lot of the analytics anymore. In a few days, they're going to close it down. So I won't have a way to see how the podcast is charting for free. So I don't know when's the next time I'll be able to see how this improves or how it changes over time. But as of right now, with the last thing that Chartable provided me with, the podcast has charted on different Apple Podcast categories and in different countries. So here goes. So we've got Apple Podcasts and the mental health category in Armenia. My peak position there was 12. Then Apple Podcast mental health category in Sri Lanka, I peaked at 15. Then Apple Podcast Health and Fitness category in Armenia, my peak position there was 29. Apple Podcast Mental Health in Latvia, I peaked at 42. Apple Podcast Health and Fitness in Sri Lanka, I peaked at 46. Apple Podcast Mental Health in Brazil, I peaked at 46 too. Apple Podcast Mental Health in South Africa, I peaked at 54. Apple Podcast Health and Fitness in Brazil, I peaked at 98. Apple Podcasts Health and Fitness in Latvia, I peaked at 113. Apple Podcasts Health and Fitness South Africa, I peaked at 122. And a few more. Apple Podcasts Mental Health in Australia, I peaked at 183. Apple Podcasts Mental Health Philippines, 205. And the last one is Apple Podcast Mental Health in Germany. I peaked at 227. So that's really cool. It's really cool. And also, full disclosure, Hello Trauma Brain, comes into the picture. I'm skeptical. I'm really skeptical of these charts because I have not that many followers. I don't have millions of views. So a part of me is like, are podcasts in these categories not popular over there? Are like 2 listens enough to chart me at 15? Even though These are peak positions. They're not all the time. There are prolonged periods of times where I am not charting significantly in anything. So clearly, if it was like 1 or 2 people, I'll be charting all the time, right? I get all that. I get that this doesn't happen all the time. And the fact that it's happening only a few times means that those are particular times where I'm charting and, it is significant. And there are specific episodes with more views and it tends to be around that time. Like, even though I can see all those things, which validate that this is real or can support that it is, that little part of me still goes, is it real? Is this a fluke, Raysa? Did you really chart in Sri Lanka? Really? I'm going to try to tell my voice. Yes, girl. We can take in that other people around the globe actually are interested in what I have to say. They care about what I have to say. FYI, if you are in one of these countries, and you want to just throw me actually, it is real. I am living in this country and I do listen to the podcast. I do welcome that. You don't have to, though. You don't have to. Because I do need to work on believing that internally. This goes so deep that even if all my listeners from Germany or Sri Lanka or South Africa or from whatever reach out and go, oh, it's real, girl. We're listening. And we can't wait for Thursday's episode. Even if I have all these people reach out and tell me, that little voice is always there. And I need to work on that. And I need to work on not needing astronomical amounts of validation and proof to even consider the possibility that it could be real, that there are actually people out there that are getting something out of this podcast. Which, by the way, I know some of you reach out. You do. I've seen your messages. I've seen your texts. I've seen your emails. I've seen your posts. I've seen you. I've read the words. I've had people reach out and say, this is so helpful. A lot of those people are people that I know and are friends, and sometimes I do think in that category, oh, they're just saying that because they're just trying to be nice. For those of you that are listeners that come my way and I don't know you before all this, I still can't take it in fully. And that's the symptom, right? When is it good enough? I set out to do this to help at least one person. And I've done that. Like, I can check that box. And yet, I struggle with feeling like it was enough. Okay, back to celebrating. We're doing this. I want to celebrate the things I've achieved. I did not see myself interviewing a soul. I thought this podcast was probably going to be going for 2 years at least before I brought in a single guest. And I've brought in a few guests. I've talked to experts in the field. I've talked to fellow survivors. I've seen experts in childhood trauma share my reels on their Instagram page. Some of them more than once. And it's blown up the reel. And the top reel, I think it was 5,000 views that it had. And that was really cool. And full disclosure, I sometimes struggle with even taking that in. I would say, oh, it wasn't because of me. It was because I had a guest. And the guest is the reason that did very well. Even though that same person who has a lot of followers who shared reels has shared solo episode reels. So it's not just the ones with guests. Even though there's the proof, my brain still goes, is it really me? It can't be me. But it is. It is me. And And even with the interviews, and I struggle with even giving myself credit for my part in the interview, the contributions I made, the questions I asked, how my participation helped shape the conversation too. Like, I even struggle with that. But I am going to, as hard as it is, celebrate the fact that I'm really proud of how I've done with the interviews. I'm proud of how I've handled it. There are some moments where I'm like, oh, maybe I talked too much there. And, the inner critic comes in. But also, I have no training in interviewing. I have no training in podcasting. And the fact that I've been able to produce that on my own is huge. The music, I don't consider myself a composer. And I did sit in front of the piano and I came up with this thing. A full-length song is coming, with some of those themes you hear in the background of the intro of Hello Trauma Brain. I've been doing that. I've done 50 episodes. I've done that. And I want to hold space for celebrating 50 episodes where I've done solo episodes, interviews, movie illustrations, song illustrations. I've created awareness about CPTSD. I've created awareness about childhood trauma. I know for some of you, you're making some big realizations because of this content. And that is huge. And though it feels so weird to say it out loud, I am proud of myself. I am proud of the content I am putting out there. And quite frankly, this is my life's work. So when I think about what is my legacy, what am I leaving behind that someone can find and benefit from? This podcast is it. It really is. Like, if I don't achieve anything else after this, in many years, when the story of my life wraps up, if I don't do anything else, I can still say that I've done this podcast. I have other things I want to leave as part of my legacy, of course. But this is definitely one of the things that if I were to look back in my life, like, I would put this in the legacy box. This is my gift to the world. It's my gift to future generations. Right here. I forget where I heard this. It probably was some YouTube video from someone talking about podcasting. I think that's what it was. I think it might have been Steven Robles talking about getting your podcast started or giving tips on that. I want to say it was him, but if it wasn't him, apologies, I'm not referencing the right person. But for now, let's say it was Steven. He was saying that a lot of podcasts don't make it past, I want to say it was like episode 10. That really struck me, like, wow. And I have seen podcasts that have been very short. And I have also seen podcasts that are very long and they've been going on for years and years and years and they're past their 1,000 episode. But if I am to take in the fact that a lot of podcasts don't make it past episode 10, dang, I did 50. At least 50 so far. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So one more thing I wanted to mention as part of this celebration are the Spotify Wrapped statistics for the podcast for this year. So the podcast had 10 top fans. And if you are one of these people and the podcast showed up on your Wrapped, feel free to tag me if you post it on social media. The podcast has an average rating of 5 out of 5 stars. I don't have that many reviews though, so... You can take that with a grain of salt. But it is still pretty cool that the average rating is 5. The top country in Spotify is showing us the United States. So Spotify also share with me where my listeners are from. And at least in terms of Spotify listeners, 16 different countries came up. And that's, again, also very, very freaking cool. And I've never been outside of the United States. So it's a little wild that literally 16 different countries have listeners that have engaged with the content in one way or another. So I don't remember seeing this last year, but this year there's also a creator personality that Spotify assigned me, and they assigned me as the storyteller. Pretty cool. I like that. So that is the Spotify Wrapped for the pod. I do want to hold space to also thank you. I really mean it. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the podcast. Thank you for joining me for this wild ride, for being here. Your presence means so much. And my wish is that this content helps you in some way and it continues to do so. That you find things that you didn't know were there before. And it gives you a sense of you are not alone. That it gives you something to reflect about that you can use. I hope all those things for you. And thank you for being a part of this. So yeah, 50 episodes. Here we are. And I intend to make 50 more. Let's see how this goes. And yay! I did it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Heck yeah. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up now and head over to celebrate myself at the coffee shop shortly. Thank you for listening to this. And yeah, congratulations to me. All right, 50 episodes. Here we go. Woo-hoo! In this week's healing invitation, I want to offer you a few things to reflect about. Think about something you achieved recently or during the past year. Did you celebrate yourself? If you did, were there things you loved about your celebration and some other things that maybe you did not resonate with as much? If so, can you make the things that worked into a tradition? Perhaps it was a nice meal, a gift to yourself, a bubble bath, watching a movie, Going to a coffee shop? If you did not celebrate yourself, I invite you to do so. There is no expiration date on celebrating yourself. It can be something you achieved 10 years ago, and it counts. Also, reflect on what celebrating means to you. This might give you some insight on how other people around you have influenced your ability to celebrate yourself. I feel like for a lot of us, it's so easy to celebrate other people, and it's so hard to turn that inward into celebrating ourselves. And this invitation is all about putting all that energy we give out celebrating other people into celebrating ourselves. Please let me know how this week's healing invitation goes if you choose to accept it. Before we wrap up this episode, all music and production is courtesy of yours truly. Also, I want to share a few ways you can support this podcast to reach more survivors that could benefit from finding this content. You can subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or the platform you are using to listen. Share this episode with anyone you think can find this content helpful. Follow Hello Trauma Brain on Instagram, subscribe to the Hello Trauma Brain YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when I post a new episode. Also, you can make a donation via PayPal. No worries, all links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. I wish you the best as you celebrate this 50th episode and yourself. It is time for our farewell affirmations. I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the belief that I am enough. I am lovable. And I deserve to heal. I wish you a gentle week and thank you for your presence.